Hello everyone. Welcome to the first of many videos which are going to be providing research methods supports related to dissertations. Today we're actually going to focus on selecting a topic, which is one of the first things that people have to think about when they're starting a dissertation. You may find I'm actually at home at the moment. This is my home office, which is actually my dining room table. It's a rather wet day in August in the UK at the moment. You'll probably find my cats bomb the videos now and again, which hopefully will add a little bit of interest. But otherwise you'll mostly have me sat here talking to you. So, as I say, today we're going to focus on selecting a topic. Now, this is a really exciting part of your dissertation because this is when you actually get to choose a topic of your choice. So in your degrees, generally, you don't get a chance to actually choose your topics that often. So this is, a really lovely opportunity. But as you can see from this slide, there's a bit of a but. Quite a big but here. There's a number of issues. In my experience, and I've got about 3 decades worth of experience of teaching on dissertations, students really do struggle with this part. And actually I sometimes find that people take weeks and sometimes months actually trying to get their heads around the topic that they want to undertake. So do not underestimate how difficult this is. And also, again, in my experience, I can find that students who've rather poorly formulated their topic at the start often find they have problems later on because they haven't really worked out what it was they were studying. So do not underestimate how time-consuming this is, and also how many times you might go down what I call a blind alley. In other words, you come to a dead end. And there are also issues about feasibility of topics that you will need to discuss with the supervisor. So you'll be allocated a supervisor, and you must bear in mind that you will need to talk to them quite a bit in the early stages of your topic selection. So once you're coming up with an idea, you will need to define an aim and some objectives. Now, I will be doing another video specifically on those, so I won't talk about them now. All I want to say at this point is your initial aim and objectives will almost certainly evolve throughout the project. So don't worry about this. Sometimes students say to me, I think my project's changed. It doesn't now fit my aim and objectives. And I said to them, well, that's okay. Go and change your aim and objectives. Research is not static. Research evolves. Probably more so with qualitative research than quantitative research, but it will evolve. So don't worry if you want to change your aim and objectives later on. So then we need to think about what makes a good project, and I've got a number of different things here. The first one is to do with feasibility. So again, students frequently come and talk to me about a topic, and I kind of listen to them and then think, this is actually going to be quite challenging, because you've just told me you want to interview Instagram bloggers who have 1 million followers. Do you know anybody who meets that criteria? Have you got access to these people? Because they're probably not going to want to talk to you. So one key issue is feasibility, and you might not have access to the subjects of your study. So if you want to go and interview leading people in, say, England athletics, if you don't have access to those people, that's going to be quite difficult. Another issue is whether you have the relevant skills. Now, if you want to do some quite complicated modelling work and you don't come from a background that has, that kind of statistical modelling involved, you're probably not going to be able to do that. So do just sort of think about where your skills lie. And then there's issues to do with sensitivity that might make projects unfeasible. We do have more stringent ethical requirements for projects that involve, for instance, children, and you may need to go through gatekeepers. Well, you're very likely to go through gatekeepers when you want to talk to children. So there are things that can be a little bit sensitive, and there are certain areas as well where there are much higher sensitivities in terms of researching human subjects. So that's something to be careful about as well, and also to be aware of. It doesn't necessarily mean a project is not possible, but it might make it more complicated for you. And then, of course, at the moment with the global pandemic, there are other issues in terms of feasibility, particularly in relation to travel and actually going to talk to people face to face. So, do bear that in mind. And again, that's something you'll need to talk about with a supervisor. Then there's things about interest. Is it interesting to you? Now, obviously, you'd hope that if you're choosing a topic for your dissertation, it would be interesting to you. But another thing I would add is make sure it's interesting to other people. I have occasionally had students talk to me about a project which they're very enthusiastic about. And I've kind of thought, but who else is really interested in this? It's a very niche area. So, you want to think about who would be interested, why is it worth studying? So, for example, football has been a very popular topic among event management students, sport management students for many years, and actually some tourism students are interested in, football tourism. It's a topic that's been really well researched because football is clearly interesting for lots of people. It's got a massive international following. But one of the problems there is actually a lot of studies have been done on football, so you need to actually think quite carefully about what hasn't been covered. So, there's issues there to do with why it might be worth studying. And another thing I've said there is, what might it be used for? So we do research because we want to actually try to change things. We want it to be useful and insightful for other people, so they might actually do something with it. So that's worth thinking through as well. And then in terms of cost, I've said not too costly in terms of time and money. So from your point of view, trying to do something which is going to take a lot of time might be quite challenging. And there are also time issues, like you can't do longitudinal studies, where you may want to actually go in and collect some data over time because you have a limited time scale here. And also bear in mind financially, if something is going to cost you a lot of money, maybe because of travel, which again could be difficult at this present time, do be careful to think that through. And then a good project is usually linked to theory in some way, either because you're drawing on existing theory, which might make it a deductive study. It can also be an abductive study, and I will talk more about deductive, inductive and abductive studies in another presentation. But, generally, we often draw on the existing theory, and all studies, we'll actually do a literature review and we'll look at what theory there is that is relevant to the study at the start. So you might be drawing on theory and applying that in your study, or you might be looking to develop your own theory, particularly if you're working in an area where there hasn't been a lot of research. And ultimately, you can see at the bottom, a good project normally has some very clear research questions and clear objectives. And these, may take a little while to evolve. So how do you generate ideas? Well, there's a number of ways here. First one is think about your own strengths and weaknesses. As I said, don't go down a route where you're going to do something which you're not particularly good at. Look at past project titles. So in a moment, I will show you where you go to find these on Brightspace. Talk to people. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to people you've worked with. Search the literature. We'll have a session on literature searching. This is the place I'd always suggest people start. Go and find out what's out there. Have a look at journal articles in the area you're interested in. Look at the introduction and look at the conclusion. The conclusions of journal articles often tell you what might be worth studying. They make suggestions for further research. I would keep a notebook. So this is my current notebook that I'm using. I always have a research notebook on the go, and I keep notes of everything. I make diagrams, and I jot down ideas in there all the time. That's very handy. And then you've got other things like relevance trees, where you actually brainstorming, where you start from an initial idea and think about all the different topics that might be connected to them in one way. And then some of you will have had placements and some of you will have had past work experience, and that's also a good place to start thinking about ideas. So in terms of this placement work experience, there's often something that's happened when you've been working where you've thought, oh, that's interesting, why is that happening? Or you've identified that there can be a problem with some aspect of the work. So for instance, there I said it could be something to do with organisational culture. So for instance, being a young manager, making friends, or lack of communication. So these are all areas that I've had students do dissertations on in the past. And there's a whole range of things that are interesting there. Last year I had a student who looked at workplace events, which was very interesting, and she looked at it from the point of view of students who were on placements. So how valuable they found these workplace events, but also how complex they found them to negotiate. So these are what we're talking here is about workplace social events, which are often used in terms of building workplace culture. And that was quite an interesting area. And then I've got another example which might be related to some aspect of the work you undertake, so some of your duties. So not so much now, but when TripAdvisor first came online, it was one of the things that often students on placements or people in their early career often managed the TripAdvisor comments, and that was actually quite an interesting area, and we had several dissertations on that. Now, importantly, the last point on that slide is that industrial contracts can actually facilitate your access to respondents, so participants, and also other materials. They might have useful data for you. If you want to look at past dissertations, and I would suggest that you all do, there are past examples on Brightspace. So if you go into the home page of your Brightspace and then to the Bournemouth University Business School tab, which is on the right-hand side of that home page, you will see there's a dissertation and research archive, and there you can find good examples of both undergraduate and postgraduate dissertations. So go and have a look through there. Don't just stick to your topic area, actually have a good look round, and then it'll give you an idea of the things that are being covered. So definitely go and look there. And I've just put together a list here of some dissertations from recent years that I just thought were interesting. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I'll just pick up on a couple of these. The first one there, investigating the motives of charity cycling event participants. This was one I supervised, and what was interesting here, because I actually think the projects on motivations are actually quite dull. There's an awful lot of research on motivations for tourism, for sport, for events, going out for meals. It's been really well covered. But what this student did, which was very interesting, is she had worked for a charity, and they ran these challenge cycling events. And what she was keen to find out was what motivates the people who raise the most money, because the people who raise the most money are the ones that are most important to these charities. They're the participants who they want to recruit. And so she particularly looked at motives of all the people taking part, but what she tried to analyse and separate out was how the motives of the ones who are most committed to making money, how they differed, and therefore what the charity needed to focus on in order to try to capture those participants. So that was an interesting example. And then another one here, which I found interesting, was what makes a brand a love mark. This was an interesting study. It was actually by a student who was studying event marketing, and she was very interested in design. And, so for her dissertation, she came to me and she said, well, I want to do something that's design related. And I thought, okay, right, we'll see what you come up with. And then she stumbled upon this idea of love marks. Now, love marks are brands where they no longer need a name because their image is so recognisable. So, for instance, think about brands like Pepsi and Coke or Starbucks. So people recognise their symbol, and that's their love mark. And so that's what she explored, and that was very interesting. And it did involve her using lots of visual materials with participants, so a little bit kind of different there. So there's lots of ideas for you to think about, but remember, this won't be an easy job necessarily, pinning down your dissertation topic. And over the weeks coming, in the sessions that we'll actually have online together, you might want to chat a bit about some of your topic ideas with me. Okay, so I'm going to end there, and I'll see you shortly in another video.